let's talk about Gojo versus Sukuna, Gojo's maximum, and both of their plans going forward in the fight. At the end of 231, we were told the wheel has 3 more spins to go before it's completely adapted to infinity. And Gojo declares, "I will beat you dead before it even hits 3 spins." So has Gojo completely given up on saving Megumi? I don't think so, but I think the idea that he's going to have to work harder than he originally thought against Sukuna is starting to cross his mind, and risking Megumi's life may be part of that. So how will Gojo be able to accomplish saving Megumi and stopping the wheel's adaptation? Well, right now, we know the wheel will stop adapting if Sukuna has to use domain amplification or his own technique. Given that, I think a pretty valid strategy against Sukuna's adaptation is to turn the heat up on him and force him to use his technique or amplification. And this is probably where I would expect us to finally see the Gojo Satoru maximum technique. Because we're told in chapter 231 that Gojo is still using the blue laughs even though the adaptation of the wheel is active. And a lot of people were asking, why doesn't Gojo just turn off infinity while fighting Sukuna to prevent adaptation? But infinity really is just the most basic function of Limitless, being the neutral, so while utilizing laughs, it makes sense that Sukuna would still be able to adapt to it. And this also tells me that Gojo is aware that blue's advantages in combat and just movement speed are too good to give up against Sukuna. Because the real advantage Gojo's had in this fight, as far as we know, is just how hacks the Six Eyes and Limitless really are. And while we don't know what Sukuna's technique is yet, I don't think it's going to be stronger than Limitless on its own. I don't really see the point in giving him 10 shadows and this super buffed up technique as well. And Gojo's not an idiot, so he knows his technique is probably the real advantage here, so him utilizing it against Sukuna, even if Sukuna is getting an adaptation to it, that makes sense. And quite frankly, Sukuna is tanking the blue punches like a champ, so Gojo's base punches are probably not going to cut it against him. And this whole countdown with the wheel just sounds like the countdown before Sukuna winds up going on the full offensive. Because the framing of these recent chapters, and for the most part in this fight, Sukuna has been getting cooked in melee combat because he's been adapting the whole time, and that's probably going to change eventually. Because if Gojo does kill Sukuna in this fight, it's just not going to happen until after his technique is revealed. So I really don't want another moment like the 200% Hollow Purple where Gojo does this super powerful, incredibly impressive technique that just effectively does nothing in the fight. And while we're on the note of what Gojo's maximum might be, I want to talk about it for a bit. Personally, I want Gojo's maximum technique or amp in this fight to be a temporary boost in power rather than a one-shot technique. Because in the history of anime, for me, the coolest power-ups have always been the one that increase somebody's base stats and give them some new abilities temporarily. Because what sounds more interesting to read and watch, a giant new ball to shoot at Sukuna, or Gojo going Limitless Super Saiyan? Because really, Limitless itself is bringing infinity into reality, and that as a basis for a technique is incredibly powerful. And not only is it powerful, it also gives Gege Akatame a lot of room to write in new abilities for it. Because while yes, Sukuna does have more hidden things, or things we can assume are hidden with his technique, that does not mean that Gege will not write new applications of Limitless, because Hollow Purple has been known in the Gojo clan for like centuries. And I think it's safe to say that Gojo is the most proficient and talented user of the Six Eyes and Limitless in history. I mean, one Six Eyes user died to an exorcism Mahoraga. Are you fucking kidding me? Granted, Shibuya Mahoraga does annihilate most sorcerers. The point is, Gojo has probably invented something new with his technique. And while I see where Gege Akatame is coming from, and that it would feel a little bit like an ass pull if Gojo just starts pulling out random things left and right, because so far, most of the things he's pulled out have been already mentioned previously. We know that maximums exist, and we know that characters like Geto, Pre-Domain, and characters like Jogo also have them. So Gojo and Sukuna being Gojo and Sukuna, they pretty much guaranteed have a maximum technique. And with the spatial manipulation Gojo has shown among other abilities, the sky is really the limit for what his maximum technique could be, so fingers crossed that's going to be a cool looking amp. Or he'll get something else like a limited time travel, I don't know, whatever it would be. Spatial manipulation has so many ways of being utilized, and it doesn't necessarily have to follow the exact laws of physics because it is a curse technique. There was a black hole in the series at one point, and the hints were there if you looked close enough, so the hints are probably there for whatever Limitless is going to use for a maximum. But let's talk about Sukuna now for a bit, and the 4 total spins his wheel has to reach to adapt to infinity. Because a lot of people questioned last chapter, was Gojo wrong about the amount of spins required for the wheel? And personally, I don't think Gojo is wrong. I think he knows a lot more about the wheel than we all thought he would, and at the end of the day, Gojo is Gojo, and he has the 6 eyes, so his assumption that it's 4 spins is probably correct. And even though the 6 eyes are not immune to trickery, as we saw in chapter 230, I give him the benefit of the doubt on this one. But I do want to bring up that when Gojo asks Sukuna, or at least declares to Sukuna, that he needs 3 more spins to adapt to infinity, Sukuna does not confirm this to Gojo. All Sukuna says is, "Coo, I guess we have ourselves a countdown until I wipe that smirk off your face." So the question here is, has the wheel already had a spin to infinity prior to when he put it on himself? And does a direct hit to Sukuna count for the adaptation of the wheel while it is attached to Megami's soul? So let's look at the evidence for this, in that we do not know how long the wheel was attached to Megami's soul or when Sukuna first summoned it. And we get from both narration and Mei that Megami's soul was exposed to Unlimited Void 5 times and the wheel spawned 5 times within the domains. But for the wheel to be out all 5 times, it is highly likely it was summoned prior to the initial domain clash, if not the entire fight. And in chapter 230, Gojo says, "Neither you or Megami's soul have adapted to Unlimited Void." And I do not see why Gojo would even take note of this if hits to Megami or Sukuna did not count for the other one. And we have narration also referring to Megami as himself in reference to Sukuna. And at the very start of the fight, in chapter 224, Sukuna says, "Let's start by peeling off those scales." And we know they fought for some period of time prior to the initial domain clash. So has Sukuna already had a spin to infinity? We won't know for sure until the wheel actually reaches 3 spins, but I think it's a reasonable possibility, and Sukuna is a well-known snake oil salesman, with some people being significantly easier to trick than others. But either way, I expect the wheel is going to hit full adaptation on Sukuna, because that just seems like the most likely way this fight's going to go right now. Gege might subvert expectations and something completely different happens where like Kashimo shows up, though personally I don't think Kashimo would show up ever until there's only one left. Because the Culling Games in its entirety, there is a plot twist coming here, and Gojo versus Sukuna, this is pretty much the climax of the entire arc. And the outcome of this fight, we have to feel it for the rest of the series, because I talked about this a bit months ago, that Gojo is probably the only character that will ever be able to take on a 10 Shadow Sukuna. Personally, I expect that Gojo is probably stronger than a Heian Era Sukuna even once we get the full CT reveal. And a lot of people are waiting on a Gojo Black Flash, which is kind of curious to me, because I always figured we're going to see Sukuna use this just because he has far closer ties to Yuji. So Sukuna being a Black Flash god, once he actually starts going on the offensive, I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. Or we might just wind up seeing it from both of them. But before that happens, I'm guessing Gojo is going to get Sukuna extremely close to death, far closer than he did in the domain battle. And then something will probably happen, like the wheel will adapt or Sukuna will reveal his technique, and then they'll have their full fight and move into round 3. And I'm looking forward to that, because once the vast majority of both characters' arsenals are on the table, the likelihood of an actually I didn't die moment happening goes down dramatically. But that's just my opinion, and I want to hear yours. What do you think Gojo's plan to stop Sukuna is, and how do you think his maximum technique is going to be revealed? Let me know in the comments below, and hopefully the chapter that comes out tonight while I'm making this video, it doesn't just answer every single question I put in this one. But if you like content like this, subscribe for more, and as always, thanks for watching.